Have you ever just had one of those moments where absolutely everything felt turned upside down? You know, a period where your whole world seemed to be shaking and everything you usually relied on was just completely stripped away? Well, today we're going to uncover this incredibly hidden step-by-step narrative of absolute resilience and hope, and it's found deep within the Hebrew Tanakh. We're looking specifically at a really profound transition in the book of Isaiah, where the text shifts dramatically from total, utter desolation to this completely unexpected outpouring of joy. It is a real game changer. Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today, we explain prophets Isaiah chapter 24 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the context and the text, then look at the olive tree remnant, move on to singing from the sea, explore the regions of light, discuss some key practical life lessons, and finally wrap up with a quick summary and recap. All right, section 1, context and the text. Let's set the ground rules. So the methodology we'll be using for our study today is called Peshat. If you're not familiar with it, in biblical study, Peshat refers strictly to the literal, simple, or just plain meaning of the text, based entirely on its historical and linguistic context. We are absolutely not looking at Kabbalah or any deep mystical secrets today. We're just letting the straightforward, simple words of the prophets speak directly to us so we can understand exactly what is happening in this chapter. To really grasp what's going on, we have to look at the full chapter in order. Now, the first 12 verses of Isaiah 24 describe this massive, terrifying event. Verse by verse, the text details the earth basically being made empty. Society completely breaks down from the priest all the way to the servant, and there's this great shaking where all joy is just darkened. By verse 12, the text explicitly says, "In the city is left desolation." So the whole first half paints a picture of severe judgment. And eventually, the chapter wraps up in verses 16 through 24 with even more cosmic shaking and the final establishment of God's reign in Jerusalem. But right in the middle of all this sheer devastation, the narrative makes a stunning pivot. We're going to zero in precisely on that turning point today, verses 13 through 15, to see exactly what happens to those who actually survive this shaking. Moving right along to section 2, the olive tree remnant. Okay, this is Isaiah chapter 24, verse 13. Let's read this slowly together. "For thus shall it be in the midst of the earth, among the peoples, as at the beating of an olive tree, as at the gleanings when the vintage is done." So let's break this down using our simple Peshat approach. What is actually happening here? Well, the prophet is comparing humanity among the peoples to a harvest. Think about the ancient world. You harvested olives by literally taking a stick and beating the branches of the olive tree, so all the ripe olives would crash to the ground. But after that main harvest, a few stubborn olives always managed to stay behind, clinging to those highest branches. It's the same thing with the gleanings. That refers to the few stray grapes left on the vine after the whole vintage is completely done. The absolutely crucial point here is this. The text is describing a sparse, surviving remnant of people left behind after a period of intense shaking and judgment. It paints a very vivid, stark picture of isolation and scarcity. Section 3, Singing from the Sea. Now, just one verse later, in verse 14, we read, "Those yonder lift up their voice, they sing for joy. For the majesty of the Lord they shout from the sea." Okay, so who is acting here? Those yonder, that's referring directly to the remnant, right? Those few stubborn olives left in the tree. And what are they doing? Honestly, you'd probably expect them to be weeping, just mourning the total desolation we saw in the first 12 verses. But no way. The text explicitly says they lift up their voice, they sing for joy. Where are they? They're scattered way out at the edges of the known world, shouting from the sea. And why on earth are they doing this? The text tells us plain as day, for the majesty of the Lord. Despite surviving a literally catastrophic shaking, their immediate gut response is to recognize God's majesty and just sing. This is such a brilliant illustration of the profound tonal shift happening right in the middle of this chapter. On one hand, verse 13 gives us the beaten olive tree and the stripped vineyard. It's total desolation, the harsh, brutal reality of being shaken. But then, verse 14 immediately shifts to lifting voices, singing for joy, and shouting for majesty. It's ultimate resilience. The contrast here is just staggering. The prophet is basically showing us that physical scarcity and hardship do not dictate our spiritual response. This remnant has lost everything, the whole shebang, yet they have somehow found their voice. That brings us to section 4, Regions of Light. In verse 15, the text concludes this thought: "Therefore glorify ye the Lord in the regions of light, even the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, in the isles of the sea." Notice that word, therefore. Because you have survived the shaking, and because you found your voice to sing from the sea, therefore you have a purpose. The text commands them to glorify the Lord in the regions of light. Now, in the original Hebrew, the word used here is urim, which translates directly to lights or fires, and it's very often associated with the east, where the sun rises. They are actively moving from the dark, chaotic sea, the very edges of exile and desolation, straight toward the regions of light. The ultimate goal of surviving the beating of the olive tree isn't just to exist, it is to arrive at the light and honor the name of the God of Israel. Section 5. Key Practical Life Lessons. Let's talk about what this means for us. So what should you really take away from all this? First off, it's about finding joy and resilience after seasons of severe hardship. Just like those gleanings of the olive tree, we all go through times where life just beats us down and strips things away. The lesson here is that survival itself is a reason to lift your voice. Second, it's about recognizing God's majesty even in times of total scarcity. The remnant didn't wait for a brand new, bountiful harvest to start singing, right? They sang right there, from the sea, in the immediate aftermath of the desolation. They realized that God's majesty remains constant, totally regardless of our material circumstances. And finally, it's about choosing to glorify the Lord and intentionally seeking out the regions of light. When you make it through the shaking, you have a choice. You can stay stuck in the darkness of what you lost, or you can purposely move toward the light, using your surviving voice to bring glory to God. Finally, Section 6. Summary and recap. Let's look at the seamless narrative arc of Chapter 24 one last time. It starts in verses 1 through 12 with total societal collapse and the shaking of the earth. Then we hit step 1 in verse 13, the remnant survives. This is represented by that stark, literal Peshat imagery of the beaten olive tree and the vineyard gleanings. Then step 2 in verse 14, the survivors actually sing for joy. They lift their voices from the sea to shout for the majesty of God. And step 3, in verse 15, God is glorified in the light. The survivors are commanded to move forward and honor the Lord. This incredible resilience ultimately paves the way for verses 16 through 24, where God's ultimate reign is fully established. It's just a perfect step-by-step journey from desolation, straight to resilience, and finally to purpose. So I'll leave you with this thought. The next time life shakes your branches, are you going to focus on the olives that fell, or will you be the remnant that chooses to sing? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.